Have you ever caught yourself believing something is so undeniable that it's not even worth reflecting on? Like being sure the sun will rise tomorrow, that gravity will stay the same, that the person who loves you today will still love you tomorrow. I've felt that way. Everyone has. And let's face it, it's comfortable. Belief brings peace. Questioning does not. But what if I told you that this conviction burning in your chest, this certainty you call logical, might just be an emotional habit dressed up as rationality? David Hume, one of the greatest minds in philosophy, would probably look at you and ask, "You feel so sure, but where's the real proof?" He wouldn't do it to demoralize you, not at all. Hume wasn't a cynic. He was curious. He was fully aware of something many people forget. It's not rational to have absolute certainties. It's rational to know how to doubt what we do on autopilot. You know that phrase, trust your feelings? Well, Hume would suggest you think twice. After all, feelings, perceptions, experiences, any of these can mislead us. For Hume, all knowledge begins with experience. We feel, perceive, observe. From there, our mind makes links between facts. If I touch fire and get burned, my brain associates fire and pain. If I see the sun appear every morning, my brain associates night, sunrise. But here's the shocking detail. The fact that something has happened many times doesn't ensure it will happen again. The universe doesn't guarantee that dawn will come tomorrow. What exists is only our habit of believing it will repeat. Habit is not evidence. It's an emotion rooted in repetition. It's unsettling, isn't it? If you've ever had absolute certainty about something and then watched it all fall apart, comment, "I needed to hear this. You're not alone." Hume didn't want to destroy your faith in life. He wanted you to be more authentic enough not to follow your impulses blindly, authentic enough to face your own mind and ask, "Hold on, is what I'm thinking actually a fact or just a result of repeated emotions?" When I started studying Hume seriously, I remember spending days with a huge sense of discomfort. I'd notice everything, my friendships, my plans, my dreams, and I'd ask myself, do I trust this just out of habit? Am I confusing memory with guarantee? It's painful to shake our mental map, yet at the same time it brings a sense of freedom. You might wonder, so how do I live my life without trusting anything? Relax. It's not about becoming a paralyzed skeptic. It's about knowing the difference between acting with awareness of uncertainties and acting under the illusion of absolute certainty. Want a real-world example? In 2008, the financial crisis broke millions of people who believed the market always goes up. That's what had been happening. Suddenly, all that sense of security evaporated. Their confidence wasn't the result of rational analysis. It was an emotional repetition disguised as fact. If you've ever put everything into something you thought was obvious and ended up frustrated, let us know. Let's talk. If Hume were alive today, he might say, "It's not about disbelieving everything, but about knowing where to place doubt to protect yourself." Here's something interesting. He himself knew that no one can live in extreme doubt all the time. It's simply against our nature. Total doubt, the kind that prevents any action, is unworkable in daily life. We need to act to live, but we can, and should, have the mindset that acknowledges, my certainties are to a large extent recycled emotions. I'll carry on, but I'm aware there are no guarantees. That changes everything. Imagine if, instead of seeking absolute certainties, you trained your mind to work with hypotheses. I assume this friendship is strong, but I'm open to possible signs. I expect the market to rise, but I'm prepared for surprises. I'm betting on this project, but I know there are factors beyond my control. Feel the difference? Being truly rational doesn't mean showing off arrogance. It means humbly admitting there are limits to certainty. When we adopt this perspective, we stop being hostages to our own thoughts. We become less vulnerable to falls. We're more prepared for the unexpected. If this makes sense to you, comment, "Yes." I want to see who's on board with this shift in mindset. Now think about it. If emotions can deceive, isn't it possible that almost everything we believe about ourselves is also the result of a self-illusion we've built? Who guarantees that the way you see yourself, strong, weak, smart, insecure, isn't just a creation of past experiences, not something fixed and indisputable. Breathe. It's heavy, I know, but it's also freeing. Because if what we think of ourselves can be a trick of emotional habits, it means it can be changed. We can rebuild. We can rewrite. If the same mechanism that creates illusions can also offer us new opportunities, then we hold a huge power in our hands. That's the gift Hume, perhaps without fully realizing it, left us. We're not stuck with our certainties. We can become responsible for a conscious kind of doubt. If you've read this far, it's a sign that part of you wants freedom as well. If people have always told you to follow your heart without questioning it, maybe it's time for some new advice. Sure, listen to your heart, but talk to it. Have the courage to question it. This ability to doubt what is automatic without losing your zest for life is one of the most valuable things we can develop. In the next section, I'll show you how this line of thinking directly relates to how we make decisions today, including the bad ones, and how modern philosophy inspired by Hume understands the invisible mechanisms that guide our deepest judgments. I promise it'll shake you up even more. Before we move on, tell me, which certainty have you seen crumble after reading all this? Share it here in the comments. Your story might help someone else who's still trapped in illusions. If you've made it this far, congratulations, seriously. A lot of people prefer to close their eyes once they sense their convictions are under threat. It's easier to cling to an illusion than to face the abyss of questioning. But you stayed. And that proves there's something in you stronger than fear. A boldness to reflect. So let's go deeper. If Hume proved that our certainties can be emotional habits, not indisputable truths, what does that mean for how we make everyday decisions? It means that many choices we label as logical might actually stem from emotional shortcuts we don't even notice. I'll give you a simple common example. You go into a store looking for a cell phone. You know brand A, super popular, everybody uses it. You feel safe with it. Brand B, although it might have better reviews, is totally unknown. Which one do you buy? Be honest. Most of the time, we pick brand A. Not because we carefully analyzed every technical detail, but because familiarity gives us emotional confidence, and the brain translates that confidence as truth. Now stop and think, how many of your choices, relationships, career, partnerships, were made this way? How many times did you choose what was more familiar? Not because it was better, but because it felt right. If you've been there, comment, I've been there. This is exactly where Hume's philosophy, centuries later, still pokes at our sore spot. We are essentially association machines. A certain aroma brings childhood memories. We feel comfort. A certain song recalls a loss. We feel sad. A certain word suggests prosperity. We trust it. These connections shape what we call intuition, instinct, gut feeling. They're useful, sure, but the problem arises when we treat these feelings as definitive truths. Hume would shout, "Careful, what you feel isn't proof of what is." Here's a bit of research that backs this up. In a classic study, Tversky and Kahneman, 1974, they discovered we use heuristics, mental shortcuts, to decide quickly based on the most recent or emotionally impactful memories. That's why, even though flying is statistically safer than driving, many people are more afraid of airplanes. The image of a plane crash is more emotionally intense, so the brain believes flying is worse, feeling something intensely, it being more true. This revelation is both scary and liberating. Scary because it makes us realize just how easily we can be manipulated. Liberating because it gives us the chance to see our mental processes more clearly. If this insight was revealing for you, type, "It opened my mind." Now comes the tough question. How many certainties are you carrying around that, if you look at them objectively, might just be emotional reflexes you never questioned? How many ideas about who you are or how the world works come solely from repetition and feelings, not from genuine investigation? If you feel uneasy, it's because you're growing. True growth always comes with discomfort. Think back on the pivotal moments in your life when you decided to change course. Were any of them peaceful? Or was there always a hint of tension, fear, or insecurity? That's the cost of growth. And as Hume pointed out, we don't perceive the world purely. We see it through the mental filters we create. These filters exist to help us. Without them, even getting out of bed would be hard. But they can also fool us, keeping us in a comfort zone filled with false certainties and automatic answers. That's where the next step comes in. If our automatic beliefs can be misleading, how do we build a mind that's freer, clearer, and more in the moment? In the next text, I'll show you how to apply this Hume-inspired way of thinking in everyday life so you can make better decisions, suffer less, and live more truthfully, without falling into the black hole of total skepticism. But first, tell me, which automatic belief surprised you the most when you questioned it? Write it in the comments. I want to hear your stories. If many of our certainties are just emotional habits dressed up as logic, the next question is, how do we act on that? Because embracing doubt is only the beginning. Real power appears when we act consciously, even knowing there are no guarantees. That's where Hume, even from the 18th century, fits beautifully into our modern lives. Picture a common scenario. You're scrolling through social media. You see a post and get outraged, some news, an absurd opinion, a personal comment. Anger flares, your heart races, and you want to fight back, argue, respond right away. Bam. Pause. Hume would say, pay attention. That emotion you're feeling right now, is it logically justified or just an emotional trigger from past experiences? When you react with instant anger, it's usually because your mind has connected that content to a history of injustice, disrespect, or hurt. But that doesn't mean today's situation is identical to the old one. Your brain just used an emotional shortcut to save energy. In other words, you're not reacting to what's actually happening, but to how your mind interpreted it based on old habits. See how deep this goes? If that resonates with you, comment, "It makes perfect sense." Now take a deep breath. Imagine if, instead of responding on autopilot, you trained yourself to pause for 5 seconds. Just 5. In that brief moment, ask, what emotion am I feeling right now? Does it really match what's happening? Could an old memory be distorting how I see this today? This simple window of time can completely change the outcome because it breaks the unconscious action-reaction cycle. It makes room for clearer awareness. And conscious awareness is the only path to breaking emotional habits and gaining the freedom to act with intention. If this has ever saved you from a fight or an impulsive decision, say, I've been through that. Let's expand it further. Think of major life choices. Your college major, staying in or ending a relationship, moving to another country, giving up on a goal. How many of these were genuinely based on serious analysis, and how many were guided by emotional echoes masked as reason? According to the Harvard Business Review, 95% of our purchase decisions happen unconsciously, led by emotions, which we only later justify mentally. 95%. If even simple things run on emotions, imagine the decisions that reshape our lives. We keep rationalizing what was, in essence, emotional. And the worst part? We actually believe we were purely rational. This self-deception carries consequences. Sometimes we spend years in a job we hate, a relationship that limits us, or a routine that suffocates us simply because our brain has linked stability to emotional security, even though rationally, we know it's eating us up inside. Why? Because at some point we learn to equate stability with survival, and our brain, which tends to save energy and avoid risks, traps us in what's familiar. But you don't have to stay in that prison. The practice that emerges from Hume's philosophy is, at its core, quite straightforward. Identify the emotional root of your thoughts before turning them into action. Ask yourself, is what I'm thinking coming from a new experience, or is it an old emotional pattern? Does the decision I'm making reflect the real situation, or an emotional memory I'm replaying? That kind of self-reflection doesn't turn you into a rigid skeptic. It makes you more conscious, more awake, more free. If that inspires you, comment, I want to be more conscious. And remember, this isn't a path to perfection. It's a daily process. Sometimes you'll manage to pause and think. Other times, you'll get swept up in the impulse. And that's okay. The point is to gradually raise your level of awareness in each choice. Now here's a practical challenge. For the next 3 days, whenever you feel a strong emotion, Anger, fear, overwhelming joy, deep sadness. Pause and breathe before acting. Then ask, is this reaction genuine, or is it just an echo of some emotional pattern? Make a note of what you discover. You'll be surprised. And you'll see how many of your certainties are just emotions dressed up as reason. If you're in, comment, I'm in. Get ready, because in the next text we're going even deeper. How emotional certainties shape our self-image, and how questioning them might lead us to a level of freedom we've never experienced before. It's going to be intense. It's going to be liberating. Before that, tell me, what major life choice did you realize was more driven by emotion than reason? Share in the comments. Your story could be a wake-up call for many still on autopilot. If we've learned so far that many certainties might just be emotional routines, the next stage is even deeper and more frightening. Those certainties define who we think we are. Think about it. If you've experienced repeated rejection, your brain might have formed the conviction that not being accepted is normal. Over time, that belief becomes a silent assumption. I'm just not good enough to be loved. What seemed like a personal trait could just be the sum of emotional experiences, solidified into your idea of identity. Just as Hume showed that our idea of causality comes from habit rather than hard observation, our view of who I am also stems from emotional associations, not from a fixed truth. It's harsh, right? Because we like to think we know ourselves, that we understand who we are, that our identity is solid and freely constructed. But the inconvenient and liberating truth is that much of what we call me is simply a repetition of emotions and perceptions we never questioned. If that struck you hard, comment, it hurts, but I needed to know. When I first grasped this, I felt like I was being deceived by my own mind. I believed my limitations and fears were part of my being, but they were just echoes of old experiences that got stuck as truth. And it's even more cruel. The more I believed in that story, the stronger it got, turning into a vicious cycle of belief, emotion, reinforcement of belief. Hume said that strong ideas are those that become vivid, meaning they carry a lot of emotional charge. See the trap? If a painful memory is extremely vivid, it feels more real than any new possibility. It's as though your brain is shouting, this hurts too much. If it hurts this bad, it must be true. But it's not. The intensity of emotional pain doesn't prove the content itself is real. It only shows how strong the association is. Nothing more. If this rocked your world, type, I'm rethinking everything. Now think, how many opportunities have you missed by clinging to a mistaken belief that was never actually true? How many ideas did you abandon because I'm not capable? How many relationships did you avoid because I don't deserve it? How many dreams did you fail to pursue because you were certain you'd fail? That certainty was nothing but a stubborn emotional pattern, not a universal law. Yes, it's tough, but it's also the best thing you can discover. Because if your certainties about yourself are constructions, they can be reconstructed. You're not chained to what you feel. You're not locked into your first thought. You have the freedom to ask, to question, to reframe. And here's a practice that can change your life. Question, with compassion, the emotional image you have of yourself. How to do it. Next time your inner voice says, I can't, I'm not cut out for this, or I always fail, ask, where does this idea come from? Which memories support it? Does that memory reflect everything about who I am, or just a fragment of the past? When we shine the light of doubt on these beliefs, they lose their hypnotic grip. You start seeing that inner narrative isn't the truth talking. It's the echo of old pain trying to protect you. It's a defense mechanism, not a verdict. If you've experienced this, if you've realized you're not who you thought you were, share, I've changed. Your story might spark hope in someone still trapped by their own beliefs. Now, something that can change everything. If you're not the result of your emotional certainties, then who are you? This question can't be answered in a hurry. It's something you live out. And that's precisely what we'll tackle in the next text. How to construct a new identity not rooted in old emotional patterns, but in conscious choices aligned with who you want to become, not who circumstances led you to believe you were. If this step appeals to you, write, "I want to rebuild my identity." We're just at the start of a journey that can change everything. See you in the next part. Maybe the biggest insight is realizing that despite all the emotional conditioning that holds us back, there has always been, and still is, another option waiting for your willpower. You're not the story others told you. You're not just the pain you've lived through. You're not the certainties created by fear. You are the conscious presence observing all this, choosing, "I can go beyond." If until today you saw yourself as someone tied to unshakable certainties, know this. The next chapter of your life can start right now. All it takes is a decision, a genuine question, a step toward your freedom. If this text resonated with you, comment, "I choose to be free." And if there's someone who needs to hear this, share it. Sometimes a small action can save someone from a lifetime of illusions. This journey doesn't end here. We'll keep building the bridge between who we were taught to be and who we can truly become. I'll see you in the next stage. Let's dig deeper. Let's